Right, Dave. We've ascertained in part one that you were pretty jammy when it comes to mistakes, but somebody you couldn't make mistakes with was the legendary Barney Curley. Now, you had a bit of a strange relationship with him because he wanted your money, you wanted his money, but realised you probably weren't going to get it. But you used to share lifts and stuff. So can you give us a few Barney stories?
Barney was a friend. I met Barney through his dealings with Colin, obviously. He was a punter, a very, very good punter, as I'm sure everybody who's watching this little podcast knows. But he was a friend of Colin's, and on the back of that, I became very friendly with Barney. The man was a legend. I know it's an overused word, but in racing, I don't think there's many people out there that would disagree. Yeah, he wanted Colin's money, not particularly mine. It was Colin's money. I was a part of Colin's machine. I wanted Colin to win, otherwise I wouldn't have been in a job. But I also had this admiration for Barney that wanted Barney to win as well. It was a real strange conflict that I had going on, wanting Barney to win, but not wanting him to win too much of Colin's money. The man was a great man. And we did become firm friends, along with Mickey Fletcher. Me, Mickey and Barney had a little friendship going on that was all of our own.
So you must have had a well-marked card then.
Barney was clever. I don't know if I coined the phrase or whether it was a phrase that I heard, but Barney had changed the bowlers. He wouldn't go down the same route every single time because he realised that to keep getting on at the level he wanted to get on with, he had to put different people into back horses for him, most of which were winners. He didn't back too many losers, Barney. And he didn't always just come straight to Colin. He might go to Stephen Little. He might go to John Turner, who at one point was a big player. Ron Bolton, similar. Michael Tabor came out on the rails for a while and wanted to take people on, including Barney. So he swapped and changed, Barney. He was cute. Nothing that he did wasn't thought out. He didn't get up in the morning and without a plan. Every day that he set out, whether it was just at home in the yard, whether it was something that he was doing eventually like Daffra, or whether it was backing winners, Barney had a plan.
Now, you told me a few months ago now about, was it trip to Brighton or somewhere where he stayed?
Bognor Regis.
Bognor Regis.
Bognor Regis. So I've gone down to the May meeting, the 3-day May meeting, as it was back in the day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with Colin for the 3 days. Colin by this time lived down south. He lived near Ascot. It was a beautiful, beautiful 3-day meeting, weather-wise, this particular May. The year would escape me. And Barney rolled up. Fletcher was there. And before racing even began, Barney said to myself, "Are you staying down?" I said, "Yeah, I am actually. I'm staying with Fletcher. Colin's travelling every day back to Ascot, but me and Fletcher are going to stay down in Bognor. We've booked a hotel, a little hotel called the Pickwick." Barney says, "I'm going to stay down with you. Ring up and book me a room." I said, I don't think it'd be a hotel that you want to stay at, Barney. I said, "It's a little bit below your standard." He said, "Brewer, if it's good enough for you and Fletcher, it'll be good enough for me." Promptly rang the hotel, booked him a room. I think he backed a couple of winners that day. He was in good form. And Colin went off back to Ascot. Me, Barney and Fletcher in my car drove down to Bognor Regis, which was about 35 minutes away. Booked into the hotel, and Fletcher said, "Come on, let's go for a walk." So we set off walking on the front. Halfway along the front, I think I said, "Are we going to stop and have a beer somewhere before dinner?" And Barney said, "We just need to turn up this street. There's something I need to do." Halfway up the street, we came across the biggest Catholic church in Bognor Regis. And Barney said, "Just wait here 2 minutes, boys. I've just got to go in and sort a few things out." So off he popped. 5 minutes turned into 15 minutes, turned into 30 minutes. So I said to Fletcher, "I've got to go in and find out what's going on." He said, "You can't go in there. It's a house of God." I said, "I need to see what's happening." I've walked through the door and Barney's down at the front, still knelt down. I've walked up to him and I've gone, and he shooed me away. So with that, I've gone back out, went up the street with Fletcher, found a pub with a beer garden, we sat there. Another hour later, Barney walked in and I said, "What happened to 5 minutes?" He said, "Brewer, I'm really sorry. When I got in there, me and the big man had a lot more to talk about than I thought." And that was his explanation. I said, "Right, do you want a drink?" He said, "You can get me an orange juice."
So he would never tip you up any winners then?
I backed 3 horses for him in all the years that I knew him, and there was probably about 7, 8 years in between. 3 coconuts, every single one won. Whether I was lucky for him or not, or that was it. Nobody has a 100% strike rate, but with me, Barney had. And he left me 6, 7 years in between. Whenever I spent any other time in his company, it was like the grave. He wouldn't tell you anything. So much so that I went down to, what was the track called? Seaside track in past Newmarket.
Yarmouth?
A friend of mine was on business and said, do you fancy going down for the day? Not to Yarmouth, somewhere near. And I noticed that Yarmouth was on. I said, yeah, you'll go do your business. We'll go to Yarmouth. I'll ring Barney up and see if he's going, because Barney's always like runs at Yarmouth. Anyway, I rang him up. I said, 3 days' time, there's a meeting at Yarmouth. I'm coming down. Have you got any runners? He said, yeah, I've got a couple that day. He said, do you want to get me some tickets? I said, brilliant. Can you get me 2? He said, yeah, I'll leave them on the door. Ring me when you're somewhere near. So I dropped my mate off. He did his business. We then went on to Yarmouth. And I rang Barney. I said, we're here. He said, come on in. He said, we'll go and have a drink in the owners and trainers. So we went in the owners and trainers, and I said, 2 runners today, Barney. Tom Quealy rode them both. He was a big fan of Tom's. I was always disappointed for Quealy that, after his amazing association with Henry, that he didn't seem to be a fashionable jockey. But Barney liked him, and Barney used him. So I said to him, should I have a few quid and anything today? And he said, they're both tricky characters, Brewer. He said, I wouldn't want to encourage you to get embroiled in either of them. So the first one was quite big odds, and it ran accordingly. The second one was an 11-4 chance. So I watched Barney in the pre-parade ring. He clocked me watching him, and he walked out onto the track, stayed as far away from me as he could, horse cantered down to post. I followed him round when he came back on the track into the grandstand. He'd found a TV well away from everybody, and I stood behind him watching him watch the race. 2 furlongs out, it was pretty apparent to me that this was a hold-up horse that was going well within itself and that it was going to win. So a furlong to go, as Quealy pulled it out and went with it, I went up to Barney. He said, how much have you had on it? He said, I've only had 40 on it, Brewer. He said, I said, no emotion. He said, it's not a lot of money to me these days. He said, I can't get excited about 40 grand. He said, I've only won 110. I said, oh, thanks for the tip. He said, what can I do? I can't be tipping everybody. And he was my friend.
And the final story I wanted to know about was, I read in a very old magazine that Colin lent him some money, and Barney gave it to his wife, and it turned out that it wasn't quite what it seemed.
We had a punter. I couldn't tell you his name. He was a small chap, beard, very neat, very tidy bloke. And he had his first bet with us at Cheltenham. And he had 2 grand on a 5-2 favourite in the seal packets. You know, the old seal packets that you used to get from the bank. Shrunk wrap, I suppose you'd say. And the horse won. Colin, as he always did, gave him the 2 grand back, and he gave him the 5 grand out of his own money. The next time we saw the bloke, the horse was running at Aintree, and it was I think it was a 6-4 chance that day, and he had 2 grand on it, £2,000 in sealed packets. Horse won. Colin gave him his £2,000 packets back and his 3 grand profit. He then started betting with us on a fairly regular basis. When I say regular, whenever he turned up, he'd be very selective. He'd have a bet. I'd never seen a bloke back as many single winners, all short price ones, in a row. He finally got to York, and it was the August meeting, and he had 2 grand on a horse, and it lost. Barney came along at the end of the day. He said, I'm short of readies, Colin. Can you lend me some money? He said, how much do you want? And Barney said, 2 grand. So Colin pulled out the 2 grand that the bloke had been betting with us for the whole of that year, backing winners, and gave it to Barney. Next news, Barney gets in touch with Colin. He said, those packets that you gave me had £40 at each side, so £80 in each packet, £160 in total, and then were then filled with some other sort of paper in the middle. So the bloke had been having 2 grand on horses with 160 quid. He then turned up the following month, where were we? Was it at Goodwood? Yeah, I think it was at Goodwood. And he came across. Colin said to me, go get an official. Got an official. Police were involved, and he got arrested. It's a long time ago, and I can't tell you what happened, but he did get his collar felt for it.
And the final thing I wanted to mention about, you were going to mention in the book Following the Horses.
Finbar Slattery. Finbar Slattery I didn't know at all, but he was a pal of Barney's. And he wrote a book called, Following the Horses. I believe back in the day, he was a Gaelic football manager, which is how Barney loved his Gaelic football. And I think he might have managed Killarney. Anyway, me and Barney were stood chatting at Cheltenham, and I'm back in the 80s. And this chap came up and said, now then, Barney, how are you doing? Long time no see. And he said, I'm fine, Finbar, how are you? He said, yeah, I'm good, I'm really good. He said, I'm in the process of writing a book. He said, who's this young man with you, pointing at me? He said, oh, this is a pal of mine, David Brewer, who works for Colin Webster, the Racecourse Bookmaker. And he just happened to say, and how old are you, young man? I told him my age. He said, that means you were born in 1959, which I was. And he said, that was the last year that I came to Cheltenham, 1959. Do you mind if I take a picture of you and Barney together? He took a picture of me and Barney, and the book came out some time later. Barney never said a word about the book, but Jack Ramsden, who was another friend of Colin's and another legendary gambler who used Colin to have some of his bets with, came up to me one day at York and said, I've bought you a book. I've been in Ireland and I found this book in a bookshop. And it was Following the Horses by Finbar Slattery. The front cover was a hay cart being pulled by a donkey. And sat on the hay cart was Lester Piggott, Barney's son Charlie, who unfortunately died in a car incident, and Finbar Slattery. And Barney was sat on the Hale Bay with the reins to the donkey. And on, I don't know, page 36, 37, there were a series of pictures. And there was the picture of me and Barney. And captioned underneath was, I met Barney with his friend David Brewer at Cheltenham earlier this year. And the reason I enclosed this picture is David was born in 1959, which was the last time I'd been to Cheltenham until this picture was taken. It was a lovely picture.